Today, we're going to dive into some historical moments that sound like they were pulled straight out of a Hollywood script. I mean, these are the kinds of tales that prove the past is way weirder, funnier, and just more mind-boggling than we could ever imagine.
Come on, be honest with me. When you think of history, does your mind immediately jump to dusty old textbooks and trying to memorize the names of kings and dates of battles?
Well, think again, because we are about to show you that history is absolutely jam-packed with myths that need busting, coincidences that justify any logical explanation, and one particularly bizarre war that was fought against, well, you'll see.
Okay, so let's get right into it by tackling some of the most famous facts from history that are actually, completely false. These are the images and quotes we all know, but the real story, it's something else entirely.
All right, first up, the classic image of the Viking warrior. You know the one. Big beard, bigger axe, and a helmet with giant horns sticking out. It's iconic, right? Well, it's also totally wrong. Historians have found zero evidence for this. That whole look was actually invented for a Richard Wagner opera in the 1800s because, hey, it looked super dramatic on stage. In a real fight, horns would just be a convenient handle for your enemy to grab onto. Pretty impractical.
And how about Napoleon Bonaparte? The guy whose name is literally the basis for the short man syndrome? Turns out, the whole Napoleon complex is built on a lie. See, he was recorded as being 5'2" in French units at the time, but that translates to 5'7" in modern English measurements. That was actually a little bit taller than the average Frenchman back then. The whole myth was just fueled by British propaganda and a simple, kind of silly measurement mix-up. And now, let's talk about maybe the most famous out-of-touch quote in all of history. The story goes that as the French peasantry was starving because there was no bread, their queen, Marie Antoinette, supposedly offered this helpful suggestion. Yeah, nope, not a chance. She never said it. That phrase actually first popped up in a book by the philosopher Rousseau, and he just attributed it to a great princess. But here's the real kicker. His book was written when Marie Antoinette was only 9 years old, years before she even set foot in France. That line was pinned on her decades later by revolutionaries who wanted to make her the ultimate symbol of royal indifference. So we've busted some myths. But what happens when the actual documented truth is even more unbelievable than the fiction? Let's look at some historical coincidences that are so strange, they honestly feel like glitches in the Matrix. Okay, picture this. It's 1898. An author named Morgan Robertson writes a novel called Futility. It's all about this massive, state-of-the-art luxury liner that's hailed as being totally unsinkable. But on its maiden voyage, it strikes an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sinks, with this tragic loss of life because there weren't enough lifeboats. The name of the ship in the book? The Titan. Sound a little familiar? Just 14 years after that book was published, the RMS Titanic, a nearly identical ship, suffered the exact same fate in the same part of the ocean for the very same reasons. The similarities are just so uncanny, it's genuinely chilling to think about. And the coincidences can get even more specific and, frankly, weird. Just take a look at this comparison between Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. Kennedy, 100 years later, 1946. Lincoln became president in 1860. Kennedy, exactly 100 years later in 1960. Now, this is where it gets really strange. Both were assassinated on a Friday by a shot to the head. Both of their successors were named Johnson. And get this, these two Johnsons were born 100 years apart. And to top it all off, Lincoln reportedly had a secretary named Kennedy, while Kennedy had a secretary named Lincoln. I mean, the parallels are they're almost unbelievable. But as wild as those patterns are, history can get even stranger. For our main event, we have a story that really tops them all. It's not a myth, it's not a coincidence, it is the completely true and completely ridiculous story of when a modern army declared war on a population of large, flightless birds. Okay, so the year is 1932. Australia is right in the middle of the Great Depression, and a bunch of World War I veterans have been settled on this really tough farmland. Their crops are already struggling, and then a new threat arrives. And this was not a small threat. I want you to imagine a migrating army of 20,000 large, very hungry birds just descending on your land, tearing down all your fences and devouring entire fields of wheat. The farmers were absolutely desperate. So naturally, they appealed to the government for help. The Minister of Defense actually agreed to send in the military, and he dispatched a grand total of
2 soldiers. But hey, these 2 soldiers came armed for a serious fight. They were given 2 Lewis machine guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. So you've got 2 men, 2 machine guns versus 20,000 birds. This should be easy, right?
Wrong. So wrong. The emus, it turns out, were tactical geniuses. When the soldiers tried to herd them into an ambush, the emus just broke up into small, fast-moving groups, basically using guerrilla tactics. In one encounter, the soldiers opened fire on 1,000 emus, only to have their gun jam after killing maybe a dozen. The rest just scattered. They even tried mounting a machine gun on a truck, but the ride was too bumpy to aim at anything. The birds were simply too fast, too smart, and too unpredictable.
The commanding officer, Major Meredith, was just in disbelief. His official report actually compared the birds to tanks, noting their incredible ability to absorb bullets and just keep running. You can just feel his respect for his feathered enemy in that quote. So, after about a week of total failure and becoming a running joke in the press, the troops were pulled out. But the emus kept attacking the crops, so the farmers demanded action. And believe it or not, the army was sent back in for round 2.
And the final results of this grand military operation? Well, the army fired nearly 10,000 rounds of ammunition to get less than 1,000 confirmed kills. That is a staggering rate of 10 bullets for every single emu. The emus had, for all intents and purposes, won the war. So after all these strange stories, you might be asking, why does any of this weird history even matter? Well, it's a lot more than just a collection of fun facts you can pull out at a trivia night.
These tales do a lot more than just entertain us. They show us that the neat, clean version of history we're often taught is really just an illusion. The story of a queen's careless quote? That was propaganda. The story of a war against birds? That shows us that even the most organized plans can just fall into complete absurdity. These stories remind us that history is human, it's messy, it's unpredictable, and often it's way more entertaining than fiction.
And all of this leaves you with a question. The next time you hear a story that sounds just a little too perfect, or a fact that everyone just seems to know, maybe it's worth taking a second look. So what piece of common knowledge will you question next?